Hey, it's me. Hardly anyone truly doesn't believe in God at all. Most people have at least some belief in a higher power or intelligence that created the universe. But I've noticed that many people don't really think beyond that. They often limit what they believe God can do. Some people admit that God exists or that there's a higher intelligence, whatever name you want to use, it's all the same. But they don't believe that in this amazing creation, a being of higher intelligence, that humans, it's possible for humans to communicate with this higher intelligence, or this higher intelligence can communicate with us. They find that hard to accept. Now, think about this 100+ years ago, it wouldn't have seemed possible to fly in an airplane, right? Or to turn a dial and hear music from hundreds of miles away, or to see moving pictures on a screen, right? None of those things would have seemed possible. Yet we've accepted them. They exist. Often we accept things as possible because trusted people tell us they're scientific, even if we've never experienced them ourselves. So why, when communication with the spiritual world is known to us, do we think it's impossible? Why do we think it's a trick or a delusion? We dismiss it. Is that reasonable? If so many incredible things are possible in our world, why shouldn't it be possible for God to send us messages of truth to help us? That's really not any more astounding than other things we've accepted, is it? For our purposes, let's assume communication with divine realms is possible. It's existed, it always will exist. Many people feel a calling from God. Whether this call comes through depends on a person's spiritual development, where they are on their spiritual journey. And there's many who haven't felt this call yet. And that could be because they're still in the early stages of their spiritual journey, right? The call wouldn't mean much to them where they're currently at. They haven't reached the level of maybe strength or development that's needed to follow the call, to heed the call. So it's more about just waiting until they've matured enough through their experiences and wisdom. But eventually, the call comes. And I believe that every one of us has been called. What does this call feel like? So, as we talked about before, we have these two sides to us, the higher self and the lower self, which often conflict with each other. The higher self senses the call and nudges us in a certain direction that our conscious mind might not immediately understand. We might feel a longing or dissatisfaction with our current life, even if we're doing all our duties, right? What we should be doing, so to speak, as best we can. There's this inner voice, a kind of pressure almost, pushing us toward something unknown. We don't quite know where or why, but if we don't resist it and don't give in to our lower self, we eventually find out. If our lower self wasn't active, heeding the call would be a lot easier. But the lower self doesn't want to make an effort or change. It holds us back and gives us all sorts of excuses not to follow our higher self. These excuses can be obvious, like I don't have time, or you have self-doubt. These are all rationalizations. But because we're not used to recognizing them and taking off our masks, we believe these excuses. We believe them as truth, in a sense. We want to believe them because it's easier. But until we win this inner battle, once and for all, we won't find peace. The call will keep getting stronger, and the more we resist, the more dissatisfied we'll become with our lives. The more God expects from us because of our spiritual development, the more dissatisfied we'll feel if we don't follow this call. I mean, you've probably experienced this in your own life, maybe to a lesser degree. I know I have. Think of those times when You felt like you didn't live up to your potential. How did you feel? Did you feel dissatisfied both outwardly and inwardly? Okay, so now that we have some understanding of how the call feels, let's look at what comes next and what's expected of us. So our lower self has some idea of what comes next, and that's why it resists. So what does God want from us when he calls us? Well, he doesn't expect us to be martyrs or take on huge tasks, though some might be called to do that. Most of us aren't. We can fulfill his will within our own homes, so to speak, even, in a way where no one else needs to know. I mean, who's to say what's a big task and what's a small one? Being famous doesn't necessarily mean your task is greater than working on your spirituality in solitude. What God wants from each of us as a first step before we can give to others is self-development, self-understanding, self-purification, self-knowledge. It's about tearing off our masks and letting go of our self-delusions about who we are and what motivates us. God expects this from us. If you're not feeling happy or harmonious, you can honestly say, I haven't fully followed God's call. So I would propose asking yourself just that. How happy am I? How balanced do I feel? How harmonious am I inside? Now, you might have troubles on the outside, but if you're truly on the right path and doing God's will for you, you feel happy regardless of external difficulties. That can be a measure of where you stand and how much you're fulfilling. So ask yourself, how happy am I? How satisfied am I with my life and myself? Reflect on that. If you feel any disharmony or dissatisfaction, you'll know why. If you really want to follow the call, you can. Don't say, I don't know how or where to start. I can't do it alone. Of course, you can't do it alone. But first, you have to truly want to do it. You have to decide clearly and unconditionally. Then God will guide you wherever you need to go and provide whatever means are best for you so that you can develop yourself, embody highest self. It's not enough to just live a decent life and be an ethical person who doesn't harm others or break laws. That might be enough for someone who's just starting out spiritually, but not for you, not if you're listening to this right now. So test yourself and ask, how much do I really want to follow the call, even if it means I have to use willpower, make an effort, be patient, and maybe even face some pain? Recognizing yourself and tearing off your masks is always painful during the process. It's a huge relief afterwards. It brings a new peace to your soul once you overcome that initial resistance. So we need to understand that first, that we have to transmute our lower self. We have to use our conscious willpower. Together with higher self, our willpower must win. And to not do it in a superficial way, right? Keep testing yourself on how sincere and deep your desire is to do God's will. How much are you willing to sacrifice? Because that might mean giving up self-delusion, selfishness, or clinging to faults and weaknesses. How much are you willing to let go of all that? At first, the sacrifice can seem huge, but only when you're in the midst of the process. Afterward, you will realize that you freed yourself from burdens and chains that were directly causing your unhappiness. Then you'll understand without a doubt that God's will for you requires no real sacrifice. It brings you happiness on every level, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Until you win this victory, the decision may seem like a sacrifice. And that's also part of what God wants for you. There's a reason he doesn't give you this realization beforehand, but only afterwards. until you fully decided to do God's will, whatever that means, and made your lower self surrender, so to speak, which you can do by penetrating your willpower into all layers of your consciousness. Do not even worry about what you should do next or what the practical consequences will be. What comes next will be revealed to you through guidance and inspiration. You don't need to worry about it right now. I can promise you that if you reach the point where you can say, I want to follow the call completely, you have won the most important and hardest of all battles, and nothing that follows will compare. You'll come out of that battle not only victorious, but also much stronger than before, and of course, happier. You won't be quite the same person as you were before. And then, God will help you take the next step. You can trust that. Ask God for the strength to win this battle. All you need to do is think of asking God for his help. Many people say beautiful prayers, but they rarely think to ask for help when their immediate spiritual problems happen. That can be a mistake because there are spiritual laws at work here. If you ask for help, you will receive it, especially the kind of help we're talking about. You're expected to turn to God with your difficulties. If you truly want this help with all your heart and ask God for it, he will answer you. The only question is, how honestly do you really want it? How much of your lower self is still strong enough to pull you in the opposite direction? As long as you don't face this and don't want to see its significance, you can't win. And your prayer won't have the desired effect because it's half-hearted and full of reservation. So I'm sharing these words with you so you'll know how to win the battle and follow your call. Only then will you find the peace and harmony you've been longing for. We all know that selfishness is wrong. Likewise, we all know that giving to others is right. It's part of divine law, and it's part of what makes us happy. But there's many ways to give. Now, a lot of people, they find that the easiest way to give is financially. It hurts the least, it requires the smallest sacrifice, right? If you have the money. On the other hand, everyone knows that giving love is the greatest gift. And we all want nothing more than to be able to give love. But how many of us find ourselves saying, if only I knew how, I can't love as much as I want to? If that's how you feel, then your soul is hurting in some way and needs healing. And you can't heal that alone. God can help you though. If all your inner currents were flowing according to divine law, you'd certainly be able to love. Every one of your faults and shortcomings directly blocks the unfolding of love. Now, when I say unfolding, I just mean that the love you want to give is already inside you. You don't get it from the outside, it exists within you, but it's covered by layers that prevent your love from shining through and expressing itself. These layers can be your faults, your fears, your ignorance of spiritual law. And they have to go. And this can only happen through your personal and serious efforts. This is the path to God. This is the spiritual path we're talking about. This is what it means to follow the call. Each of your faults, directly or indirectly, hinders love. You can't learn to love by forcing yourself. Love will grow naturally as a result of self-knowledge, self-understanding, self-purification. So one of the best things you can meditate on is, what are my faults? And how could any of my faults possibly be preventing the love that's obviously hidden within me from showing? Okay, so I challenge you, find a personal example. You might initially think that some of your faults have nothing to do with the growth of love, but I assure you they do. Now, at the same time, there's a really beautiful and direct way to love, in addition to the more indirect way I just mentioned. I think both can be pursued together to help love grow within you. If you can learn to do what I'm about to tell you, you'll gain a powerful tool to heal the unhealthy currents in your soul, and you'll let your love unfold. Everyone has the understandable tendency to want to appear better than others. You see this on social media all the time, right? We hide our faults and shortcomings and try to show our best side. We all crave admiration, acceptance, and love. We think that by showing our best side, we'll receive love. But we all know that if we want to receive love, we have to give it first. Trying to impress others, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, isn't giving love. On the other hand, you truly give love in the deepest sense when you show yourself as you really are, without any masks, your authentic self, even if it means a bit of embarrassment. By doing this, you're offering the greatest gift. Why? Well, because others feel just as insecure as you do. If they see you as perfect, as how you wish to appear, their own feelings of inferiority are going to increase. They'll think, consciously or unconsciously, oh, he's so perfect or she's so perfect. Why can't I be like that? They'll feel even more alone, more deflated, and they'll dislike themselves even more. So in their blindness, and as their own defense, they'll build an even thicker shell around themselves. This creates separation. It separates them even more from others. And they'll do what you're doing by trying so hard to appear independent, tough, and oh so perfect. But if you show yourself as you really are, with all your weaknesses, without any pretense, you give a great and generous gift. Your friend will think, wow, he or she's not any better than I am. And this will lift them up. They'll relax and feel less alone. And you know what's going to happen? You'll receive exactly what you've been trying to get all along: love and admiration. You'll receive love because you've given it first. You've given it up. You know the spiritual law. You have to give up what you want to gain. You've given up seeking admiration by trying to impress others and wanting love because you seem so wonderful. Instead, you've given a gift to others by easing their loneliness in their perceived imperfections. Everyone thinks they're alone in their imperfections, even though they might see and criticize others' imperfections all the time. This is one of the inconsistencies of our blind and undeveloped selves. You've given up your vanity, you've let go of some of your ego, and that's why you'll receive in this way, and only in this way, what you've never been able to get before, which your lower self has been chasing in its blindness. By letting go of your ego like this, you give the greatest possible gift to another person, and so the law must take effect. It's such a simple way, so simple that we often don't think of it, and yet at first it doesn't seem easy. It feels hard to step down from the pedestal we've built for ourselves, whether we realize it or not. But once you take this step, despite all the resistance, you'll see divine law working within you and around you. The result will come. Wherever you have a problem you can't solve, try this. Just try it. You don't have to exaggerate or go to strangers or put yourself down. Nothing that makes others uncomfortable. Just take off your mask naturally and without fuss. Find out who you really are and be that person. Here too, you'll receive help, opportunities, inspiration about when and how to do it, once you've decided to ask God for his help. Suddenly, if you stay open, you'll find yourself in a situation, maybe with a family member or a friend, where you realize for the first time that you've been putting on an act, that you haven't been showing up as your true self. Once you become aware of this, you'll be able to act as you really are without any pretense. Okay, so no over the top exaggerations, no extremes. As with everything else, there can be two extremes here. Some people go to the other extreme and put themselves down in front of others. They say things like, I am so bad, I'm such a sinner, I'm this, I'm that, right? This is just as much a mask as the other extreme. These people are trying to achieve the same thing as those who boast. Yeah, it's a clever tactic, even if it's unconscious. By accusing themselves, they take away others' ability to accuse them. Now, this might even contradict their self accusations, boosting their ego, right? They might think that by admitting their faults, they don't have to actually work on overcoming them, right? So, this attitude exists too, and it's just as unhelpful as the one that we just talked about. Okay, they're both extremes. It's important to know your weaknesses and which of those extremes you lean towards, because only what's truly genuine will have an effect. That's something that you can be sure of. That is also a law. Till next time, I love you. Let's connect soon.